I'm going to just introduce it. We were discussing about, we all talk about the Draghi Report and these things that you have the name and many people is behind it. And both the Draghi Report and the Letter Report identifies Europe's failure to capitalize on the first digital revolution, the root cause of the productivity divergence with the US since the mid-90s. Actually, when you see the largest market capitalization industries today are Americans, and they were created in that moment. So the risk of repeating this now with deep tech industries is enormous, particularly seeing the evolution of China and the US. In this context, scientific institutions, such as the BIST community, are not simply knowledge generators, fully integrated into an industrial policy that connects cutting-edge research, technology transfer, and business scalability. They can become strategic infrastructures for European competitiveness, as the minister was saying. The combined impact of the BIST community on both frontier research and disruptive innovation gives us a responsibility to explore how we can better contribute to this European goal. We want to become a more relevant player in the value chain to lead to new and robust industries, allowing us to maintain our social model. That is why we have organized this high-level session to analyze what conditions are necessary to better turn frontier research into disruptive innovation and new industries in Europe. And we are going to do so with a conversation among 4 key actors. Ms. Nadia Calviño, President of the European Investment Bank and formerly Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy of Spain and Director General of Budgets at the European Commission. Professor Teresa Garcia-Milà, President of the Cercle d'Economia, Professor at the Pompeu Fabra University and Director of the Barcelona School of Economics. Ms. Carolina Aguilar, CEO and co-founder of the startup INBRAIN Neuroelectronics, nurtured by the ICN2 in the BIST community, which has already raised $124 million in investment. And Dr. Gábor Lamm, Director of the EMBL Enterprise Management Technology Transfer Limited, the tech transfer organization of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. An accident this week has prevented Dr. Lamm from traveling, but he has kindly agreed to join us virtually. And we are going to begin with a keynote speech by President Calviño, followed by the conversation. Presidenta, cuando quieras.
Good morning. It's such a great pleasure to be here in Barcelona today and to participate in this very important forum organized by the Barcelona Institute of Science and Technology, BIST, at a very special moment for Europe and the world. As the minister just said, we all know what's going on in the world. So let me first personally thank Andreu Mas-Colell for putting together this insightful panel and, of course, the BIST organizers, and devoting so much energy and commitment to mobilizing finance for science and technology to the benefit of our economies and our citizens. And I want to also thank wholeheartedly Minister Ereu for his kind words. And I also want to thank all of you for the work that you are doing to build a better world, which is at the end of the day what putting research into innovation and then changing the world, this is all what is all about, and I think that's what inspires and motivates you every day. I'm really happy to be here because the Barcelona Institute for Science and Technology is a model of multidisciplinary excellence and an engine room for the next wave of technological transformation. Researching and acting in very important areas, biotechnology, photonics, AI-enabled discovery. I found very interesting this reflection about collective intelligence as being the right way forward, not so much artificial intelligence. What we need is wisdom, don't we? And I am really happy to be here because this is the proof of concept of the main message that I want to share with you today. Many are the reports and the experts that are sharing the diagnosis of what we need to do, what are the challenges, But I want to leave a main message with you today, and that is that Europe is a superpower, and that joining forces of the public and the private institutions and companies working together, we will successfully tackle all current and future challenges and maintain Europe on an upward path of shared prosperity, security, and welfare. And this conviction and this determination is based on my personal experience. When I was a minister and a vice president in the government of Spain, I visited many countries, many companies, many universities, many research centers, many startups, large, small, including some of the flagships that are represented here today. And likewise, now as president of the European Investment Bank, I am talking to governments, to private banks, to investment funds, to startups, to large corporations in the 27 member states. And this personal first-hand experience clearly confirms that the European Union is a technology, trade, and manufacturing powerhouse. As the video we just watched said, much more than people think, and much more than the media usually say. Europe hosts centers of excellence in quantum and high-performance computing. One of them is just around the corner from here. Industrial robotic leaders, advanced manufacturers, world leaders, technological leaders and powerhouses in the areas of aerospace, food, biotech, health tech, medical devices, advanced pharmaceuticals. And there is a growing ecosystem of startups and also venture capital funds. And Barcelona is a very good example of this bubbling environment. All those things that are happening right now in Europe can bring us to a higher level through three drivers. First, build on Europe's strengths. Speed and scale give Europe a competitive edge in fast-moving sectors. At the European Investment Bank Group, we are investing record levels in technological innovation, including in security and defense, developing new instruments that can catalyze private investment. Yesterday, we were discussing some of those instruments, and we may discuss a bit about that in the panel. We have launched last year TechEU, our flagship and largest ever technology financing program to mobilize 250 billion euros of investments by 2027, which seemed to be very far when we launched it, and it's around the corner. And we are on track to mobilize that investment. Let me stress that just in Spain, last year, we financed a record figure of 2.8 billion euros in innovation that have mobilized close to 9 billion euros, complementing the programs and the very important investments launched by the government. Once again, the European Investment Fund, our subsidiary specializing in capital guarantees, securitizations, has played a very important role in translating ideas, research, and science into concrete technology and projects, thanks, for example, to the agreement with the Center for Technological Development and Innovation, el CEDETI, a pioneer program in Europe. As a result of this cooperation, we have already signed a first deal with the Montana Fund in the important field of child health, the only pediatric fund that exists in Europe, also based here in Barcelona. Another fantastic example of how innovation and technology transfer can translate into new industries in Europe is the investment of the EIB in Eurafoods, supporting research and innovation activities to develop next-generation plant-based proteins and more sustainable food technologies. I will actually have the opportunity to visit them, to visit their lab later today. I don't know if I will have to taste one of those hamburgers. Yeah? Very curious to see what's going on in Eura and very proud to finance them. The EIB is also financing the construction of the Caixa Research Institute, the research center of La Caixa Foundation that is being developed here, just across the street. It is the first center in Spain for interdisciplinary and applied immunology research, and it is expected to become a benchmark in its field in Europe. Let me turn into Spanish for just a moment. Desde el Banco Europeo de Inversiones estamos muy orgullosos de ver que nuestra apuesta por la tecnología puntera tiene frutos muy visibles en el ecosistema empresarial. Hace solo unos días estuve en Bruselas en un importante evento de la asociación Digital Europe, en el que se premió a varias empresas europeas. Y sentí mucho orgullo de comprobar que, de algún modo u otro, todas ellas contaban con el apoyo del Banco Europeo de Inversiones. Y es un dinamismo y un apoyo que se manifiesta muy claramente aquí, en Barcelona. A través de distintos instrumentos financieros hemos apoyado spin-offs, ideas generadas en los centros del BIST, precisamente, y distintas universidades, apoyándolas en su fase de crecimiento. Entre esos proyectos está nuestra inversión de 20 millones de euros en INBRAIN. Está aquí su CEO, su cofundadora, para avanzar en el desarrollo de un nuevo implante cerebral de grafeno para el tratamiento de trastornos neurológicos. A través del European Innovation Council, que gestionamos también en el BEI, estamos apoyando inversiones en otras 2 empresas de computación cuántica basadas en Cataluña, en Castelldefels, LuxQuanta y QSight, cuyo origen también está en el Instituto de Ciencias Fotónicas de Barcelona, que también es parte del BIST y que tuve ocasión también de visitar como ministra. Y prueba del dinamismo del ecosistema emprendedor de Cataluña, que está hoy aquí muy bien representado, es que un 40% de nuestras operaciones de Venture Debt en España tiene como destino empresas basadas aquí, en Cataluña, muchas de ellas incubadas en los laboratorios y centros de investigación representados aquí. Una colaboración que sigue avanzando con fuerza. De hecho, quiero anunciar hoy que vamos a invertir en una tecnología que ilustra muy bien el papel clave que juega el BEI para que las ideas puedan crecer y desarrollarse en Europa. Se trata de una tecnología impulsada por científicos de la Universidad Politécnica de Cataluña para reutilizar fibras recicladas que, gracias a la inversión que vamos a realizar, se traducirán en la producción de materiales de construcción sostenible, con aplicaciones en ámbitos claves como la vivienda. Compartiremos el detalle de esta operación y de las empresas en mayo, pero quería enfatizar y mencionar esta operación concreta porque la vivienda es uno de los retos más importantes de España y de toda Europa, y también ahí, como muy bien decía el ministro, la innovación, la investigación puede jugar un papel fundamental. So, through our investments and partnerships, we're turning science fiction into science facts and changing the world to the benefit of companies, of our economies and citizens. And this brings me to the second driver I wanted to highlight, which is the importance of mobilizing private capital. In this turbulent geopolitical context, many are saying it, and I really believe it, this is Europe's moment. Because in this environment of high volatility and uncertainty, we are a beacon of trust and stability for investors. I can see that every week as we contact investors and capital markets. And there is great potential in activating private institutional investors, such as pension funds and insurance companies, channeling savings into productive investments here in Europe. The EIB Group is leveraging every euro of the European budget to mobilize 15 euros of total investment, the bulk of which comes from the private sector. We also have a very successful experience in introducing innovative financial instruments that put capital to work. The EIB Group is Europe's biggest catalyst for venture financing, with a 30% market share in 2025 in venture debt and 25% share in venture capital last year too. And we're signing deals in these 2 areas every week. The EIB continuously innovates also, and this year we are preparing to extend and scale up our venture debt program and to deploy an exit toolbox, a suite of instruments, venture debt, convertibles, acquisition finance, pre-IPO support, to improve and expand exit opportunities for venture investors in European startups and scale-ups. And I know this is a very important issue for all of you here, because beyond the startup phase, we need to deal with the scale-up phase from ideas to market and global leadership. And that's the third driver, scale what works. The EIB is one of Europe's greatest success stories, And so are the recent instruments we launched to leverage guarantees from the EU budget and to mobilize private investment, such as the InvestEU program, the European Tech Champions Initiative, which I'm particularly proud of because Spain did contribute to this European Tech Champions Initiative from day one, 1 billion euros, to support dedicated investment funds to scale up Europe's successful innovators. And it is such a great success. In barely 2 years, we have been able to double the number of mega funds in Europe. That's venture capital funds with at least 1 billion euros in capital. And this has led to the scaling up of more than 35 startups in Europe, amongst which 11 unicorns, fast-growing companies with at least 1 billion euros in capital. And this success is also showing in Spain, where we have already invested in 2 mega funds to support the market for European scale-ups, which traditionally have had to resort to funding from other parts of the world, and in particular across the Atlantic. And with the European Tech Champions Initiative, we have already invested in 4 Spanish companies, 3 of which are unicorns. And most of them, by the way, are based here in Barcelona. So Spain is a very good example of how the EIB Group, thanks to a wide range of financial instruments, supports the entire growth chain of companies, from idea to global markets, as I said a moment ago. And we will continue working with this objective, making sure that technologies, ideas, companies that are born European can grow and thrive here in Europe. I will conclude to leave room for the debate in our roundtable with a personal reflection and a call for action that some of you have already heard coming from me in previous occasions. Because at this turning point in history, as a new global order is taking shape, we need to remind us of our many strengths. There is a lot of debate and discussion on the weaknesses, the things that are not working properly, the gaps, the challenges. I really think we have to focus on our strengths. We also need to join forces and have confidence in the future. And amongst those strengths, science, research, and the ability to turn knowledge into innovation and industry are key. Europe is currently confronting many serious challenges. We are in a fight for peace, for our security, our democracies, our economic model, and our social cohesion. And this is very serious, and there are many powerful actors around us that want to weaken our union. And the multilateral framework based on international law, mutual respect, and loyal cooperation. And this is the good fight. And it is up to each and every one of us to play our role in this fight, to play a role in shaping our future. In the words of Leonard Cohen, ring the bells that still can ring. For there is a crack. There is a crack in everything. And that's how the light comes in. So let's ring the bells. This is my call for action. Let's play our role in shaping the future we want. Cada uno de nosotros ha de jugar su papel en esta fase de cambio intenso, turbulento, influyendo con nuestras decisiones, con nuestras palabras, con nuestras acciones en el diseño de ese nuevo orden mundial. También influyendo en el impacto de las nuevas tecnologías. Y en el Banco Europeo de Inversiones lo tenemos claro. Estamos en una batalla por la paz y la seguridad, por nuestra democracia y los derechos humanos, por nuestros valores y por un orden internacional basado en el derecho, en el respeto mutuo y en las alianzas en las que todos ganamos. Así que ahí, tocando las campanas que suenan, dando entrada a la luz, es donde nos van a encontrar. Thank you very much. Moltes gràcies.
We know the message, Europe leads in frontier research, but underperforms in scaling deep tech into globally dominant industries. I would add, in our country, we always say that science and research is strong, but there is still room for improvement. We need to have the goal of having Nobel laureate level scientists among us with capacity to create bigger and stronger ecosystems. This is also part of our contribution to Europe. And that's why the zero-sum game of thinking that disruptive innovation should come from limiting the focus on research of high-level research is a bad approach. We need to find a way of increasing the impact of frontier research and developing tools to valorize much better this research. So the round frames the structural gap with the US and China, linking disruptive innovation to productivity, growth, and competitiveness. And to start with Teresa Garcia-Milà, the Cercle d'Economia was key in the 60s, promoting Spain's change towards modernization of the economy, innovation, and productivity. And now, in this moment of history, what are the Cercle's thoughts on Europe's acceleration, competition in deep tech with the US and China?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Eduard, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody. I was going to frame my answer remembering that there is a large economic literature that talks about the fact that economic environment and stable institutions are key for innovation. And just to mention a few, protection of property rights, stable policies, competitive markets, a strong financial environment. We'll talk about this later, and Nadia was already talking about it. And also high quality of education at all levels, that is the basis for quality research. And before talking about the Cercle, I would like to bring, you were talking about the Nobel laureates this year are really relevant for what we're talking about today. And the first one I wanted to mention is Joel Mokyr, that he's a historian actually, and shows that sustained economic growth was not the historical norm before the Industrial Revolution. Really, there was almost no growth. And it is starting the Industrial Revolution that growth on average starts building up. We start the experience of sustained growth when technological innovations and scientific progress are built upon each other on an endless cycle. So that's where the growth starts. And we think that growth, standard growth, and maybe 1-2% is low, and we want 3-4, but really for many, many, many years in our lives, in the previous lives, there was no growth. And in Spain and generally in Europe, we are all agree that research is very solid, is at the frontier of research and internationally recognized. But although we are moving on, but we're still behind on innovation and especially bringing research to the market, which has a clear impact on growth. So the Cercle d'Economia has recently pointed out, at least I will refer to 2 issues. One, a couple of years ago, we made a comment or a note, we talk about opinion notes, about the productivity problem. Europe lags behind the US, clearly, and Spain lags behind Europe. So we have a real problem here. Spain currently, as we know, grows fast. Our growth rate is very fast, but our per capita growth is very small. Actually, the economy grows very fast, but also the population is growing very fast. So we need to focus on productivity, and for productivity growth, innovation is crucial. And the other position I wanted to mention from the Cercle is that recently it was created what we call the Initiative for Innovation and Productivity within the Cercle, and there was a paper that analyzed, I think the title is very specific. It talks about from the laboratory to the market, how to ensure technological transfer with impact. And in here, we try to highlight the strengths and flaws, and this specific analysis is based on Catalonia, but I think we can learn quite a few things from this analysis. We make some proposals, and we recognize, as we know well, that there is a strong scientific foundation in Catalonia, but we still are struggling for translating this potential into tangible economic and social impact. And just would like to mention the primary barriers that we identify. One is the structural investment shortfalls, and we're also going to talk about it because the investment is not in Europe as large, the potential of investment is not as large as in other places, and that shortfall is especially in private R&D and in the intermediate development stages. And also there is a significant institutional fragmentation. So we call for, in the report, for integrated long-term governance structure and aligned policies across universities and research centers, businesses, and public administrations. Technological transfer must become a structural priority, not a voluntary effort, and that shift requires removing bureaucracy barriers, establishing clear careers, incentives for researchers in innovation, and fostering mobility between academia and industry. Also, intermediate platforms like technological centers must be strengthened and driven by actual market demand. And ultimately, to advance in this impactful technology transfer, there is a need for unified national strategy, a stable funding, and evidence-based evaluation metrics. This is a very brief summary of what we reported recently.
Thank you, gracias. So, Carolina Aguilar, from EMBRAIN's experience, which is quite impressive, where does Spain and Europe genuinely enable deep tech scaling? And where does the system slow you down or block you? What's your experience, or what is being your experience on that?
So we do brain implants made of graphene to restore function in neuro-related disorders. And what BIST is doing is mainly what I call deep tech. And deep tech is hard. It's the convergence of many disciplines. You have physics, you have electronics, you have biology. But at the end is the technology that redefines the next 50 years. We take examples in the US, the transistors that were created by people like you, actually created Silicon Valley. We take lithography that happened in the Netherlands from the institutes around that was transferred to Philips and then to SML, is actually defining the course of semiconductors. So it's generating a trillion economy. And you have Airbus, also in Europe, that is a different story, but it's also the convergence of all these technologies and creates an aviation industry that is a world power, right? I think that these examples tell us that we can do it. And I think in EMBRAIN, what we've been having is a lot of support. So first of all, the alignment of a strategy, incentives, infrastructure, funding, of course. We always had investors like Asavis and Alta that believe in us. We had the ICN2 that support us from the very beginning. We had ICREA from the incentives perspective that brought my co-founder from Germany. You know, he was there 15 years. He had to brought back. And all these makes what we are doing possible. And I think it's fantastic. Now, that is the art of research, and we've been doing that great. Now, the D of development is the next phase. And I think we have also come very far in creating also infrastructure to grow. I think we could do more there on ISOs, certificates that we need to commercialize from day one. For instance, we've been commercializing in the National Institute of Microelectronics. We had to fund the ISO 9001 just because otherwise we could not have a product coming from that facility. So some of that infrastructure is needed, but I think we are at a point that if we have the ambition and we have the determination to actually transform with resilience, Mr. Hero is gone now, but we can make it happen. So I think that there is more than anything a mindset change of that ambition is happening, needs to happen, and we are all very supported to turn it around.
Thank you. And Gábor, I hope you feel a little bit better. Thank you for being with us. We were talking before about this zero-sum game of research and innovation, and the EMBL was born out of a diagnosis on how to overcome the difficulties of turning cutting-edge science into market-ready technology. How has been the EMBL experience to help to overcome these difficulties?
Thank you for that question, and I'm very happy to join you and thank you, I'm feeling better. I can stand, but I can't sit. So that's why I couldn't take the flight to Barcelona. So at EMBL, we do innovation management and technology transfer and science management for the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. We were set up in 1999 because it is our belief that EMBL, as a premier fundamental research institute, should focus on research. And sometimes those research results will end up in possible innovations, but that there should be an entity which specializes in actually taking those innovations to market and developing them further. And that is what EMBL is about. So we are a subsidiary of the institute and the commercial arm, but we are a limited liability company. And the idea is very basic. So the idea, and we have heard it from previous speakers, is that it is actually fundamental research which drives innovation. And this is true for every area around the world where you have all the hubs, be it the Silicon Valley or be it the Boston area. It is the scientific institutes of excellence that actually drives those innovation hubs. But you need to have professionals who also take those discoveries to market. And what we have learned is that we don't need to hide when we are comparing ourselves to the States. In all of our metrics, so I'm talking about EMBL and EMBL, we are exactly one order of magnitude below, for instance, Stanford, which is not a surprise, but in everything, so one magnitude below is fine, because that's true for the funding, to the number of staff we have, to the number of invention records we have, and the number of startups. But we're not in the Silicon Valley. So if all our metrics are exactly the same and comparable, that means that actually we're not doing a bad job, because we're not in the Silicon Valley environment, but in a much more difficult environment in Europe. So I think what is important to actually make this work is that you need to have each of the two players. So the tech transfer people and the fundamental researchers, and the third key players, of course, the industry, you need to make sure that they all focus on what they do best. And everybody does their part in a very professional manner, which means that it's okay to look around the world for us Europeans and say, you know, what the Americans are good at or what the Chinese are good at. But just emulating one or the other is not going to make us become successful. What we need to do is we need to find our own solutions which actually fit our model and fit our mentality. And that, I think, is actually one of the key problems or key issues that we have. You can say it's a problem, you can say it's an advantage. In Europe, we have an extremely rich culture, varied cultures, where we actually do a lot of collaboration, and this is what the EU is all about. And people from different cultures working together is a tremendous leverage that we can actually use. It also means that there's certain things that we won't be able to change. And one of the key facts that I think is an issue now, it's not so much the funding anymore, but it's the mindset. So I think in Europe, we have to learn to take more risk, to actually go in earlier. So if you take the example of DeepMind, for instance, which is now called DeepMind Google, and AlphaFold, which has revolutionized just about everything in structural biology. DeepMind is a British company set up in London in 2010, and that was acquired by Google in 2014. So we do a lot of innovation. We just don't like to take risk. And there are reasons for that historically, which is understandable, because just about every country in continental Europe has fought each other. So we like to have sort of a certain level of mediocrity, as I call it. But we have to learn to take risk. And that starts already at the people and the scientists that are hired at research institutes. We have to be able to give young scientists who have a high risk project or theory, give them the chance to see whether that's true or not. And I think the Americans are much better at that. So I think we should be cautious, but we should actually take chances where they occur and move a bit faster. And that's what we do in our world. So 15 years ago, we realized that a lot of the innovation potential that comes out of basic research, some of it is serendipitous. So actually just doing unfocused research is actually very good, because you never know where the next innovation is going to pop up from. So that's important. But what we realized is that in order to actually take those innovations further, sometimes we can't just do it ourselves. So we opened ourselves to actually having collaborations at a very early stage with industrial partners, with the backdrop that actually it's much better to develop something and then share it with somebody else or another entity than not being able to develop it at all, but then being very proud that it's only ours. Okay, so I think collaboration is key. I think a different mentality is also extremely important. And the third item is the different players in this path to innovation. They should all be focusing on their strength, and we shouldn't expect either one of those players to be able to cover the whole line of the innovation cycle.
Thank you, Gábor. President Calviño, you have a very wide perspective, because in the European policy you have been in the Commission, now in the European Investment Bank, and you have been also from Spain participating in the Council. And we are a little bit paralyzed with the speed of growth of China, first in science, now in innovation. And we see also what Gábor just has mentioned, the case of DeepMind, no? This feeling that everybody's running much faster than us. Beyond the European Investment Bank, what do you think are the key decisions to be taken at European level to overcome this?
Well, I'm going to be provocative with you and Maria Teresa in particular, because I very much side with this side of the panel. So there is a paradox, three reflections from my side. First, the change paradox. So when you are in the middle of change, when you are in the middle of a historical revolution, you don't see it, you don't feel it, because one day to the next, you're not really seeing the change. It's only 10 or 20 years later, you look back and then you make sense of everything. And you can tell a story. I'm telling you, it's not we should. We are doing it. This is the reality that's happening in Spain, in Europe, thanks to people like Andrea that had this vision 25, 30 years ago and sown the seeds of what is now really coming to fruition. And what we have here is amazing. And we should, celebrate and reward it every day and talk about it every day. Let me give you some data from the latest investment report. We do every year an investment report with 13,000 companies in the EU and in the US. And what we see this year, which is coherent with what we saw last year, is that European companies have withheld the tariff shock better than American companies. So European companies have adjusted, have found different partners around the world, have benefited from the wealth of trade agreements around the world, 76 trade agreements around the world, and they have realigned their partners. They have tried to look for other sources. The rhythm of integration of digital technologies into industrial companies is the same in Europe and across the pond. Productivity is the same. The only outlier is digital. The mega digital platforms, these data management hyperscalers, and that distorts the whole perspective. If you remove them, a company in Germany is as productive as in the US. There's this issue of electricity price, and that's very relevant, obviously. I'm talking about not the apparent numbers, but the real productivity of our industries. And I think it is very important that we talk about it. Likewise, productivity is growing in Spain, despite the fact that there's a massive population increase. And there's more and more content, technological content in exports in Spain. Tourism is a very important sector. I very much agree with Minister Ereu, a driver for innovation and prosperity. But the content and the growth rate of very advanced, value-added services, non-tourism related services in the exports of the country, that's growing much faster. There is a structural change going on in Spain. So it would be really good we try to open our eyes and ears and watch as it happens. Anyway, in 10 or 20 years' time, people will look back and say, it is happening. So I think we really need to move from we should, to let's do it, and we are doing it. The second, and I very much appreciate what was said, and this is my second thought. It's about the future is not written. We don't know what the next innovation is going to be. But what we do know from the Spanish perspective is that we're much better placed now than we were for the Industrial Revolution. We have missed each and every one revolution, technological revolution that has been going on throughout history. This time around, we have a very solid basis. We have a democracy. We have very good research centers, excellent universities, marvelous ecosystems, a vibrant ecosystem of startups. So, we're much better placed, not to talk about the digital infrastructures in the country, which are not comparable to many other countries. So there are all these opportunities right now. And somebody told me once, if a problem can be solved with money, it is not really a problem. So we know what we need to do. Listen to yourselves. We have these amazing innovations, but then they have to go somewhere else to scale. Well, it would be really a problem if we were starting from scratch, but we aren't. We have excellent research centers, excellent innovation. So what we need is to find the deep pockets and mobilize the money to scale them up in Europe. Let's focus on that. And that's what I'm devoting my time to, The third thought is to stress a point that has been just made, which is about the importance of ecosystems and networks. Because what makes us strong in Europe is this diversity, the fact that you have very different ecosystems in the different countries, but when they work together, they are really unbeatable. And we have to have more confidence in our ability and our capabilities, but I think what you are doing, building networks in Catalonia, in Spain, in Europe, and the growing number of European universities, joint research centers, that is going to make a very big difference, because at the end of the day, multidisciplinarity and listening to each other and learning from each other and building on those synergies is probably what's going to make the difference for us to jump on the trains, But for the moment, we should jump on everyone. We shouldn't say, oh, we missed the AI infrastructure train. We cannot do anything about it. No, we have to now work on these AI gigafactories. Maybe we will be more efficient. Maybe there will be a new technological development that's going to make these all much cheaper and allow Europe to also leapfrog and go to the next generation. We shouldn't just sit down and feel, oh, we are lagging behind, because in some areas we are, and these are the critical areas now, but in some others we aren't. And so build on our strengths, scale up, have more trust in ourselves, which was my introductory speech. And I love the way you approach things with no complex. No, we're very good, we're excellent. Let's go get it. That's very much my approach too.
Thank you. So let's focus now on the complexity of financing deep tech that requires patient capital, institutional alignment, and professionalized transfer mechanism. And somehow, both in Spain and Europe, we must decide how the fragmented national policies and financial architecture can match 10, 15 years of innovation cycles. And maybe, Teresa, going back to what President Calviño was saying, you could give us some thoughts on your vision on how Europe's fragmentation and practices could be somehow aligned to pursue those policies.
Yeah, thank you. Nadia, I completely agree with you that we have to look forward, but I think it's useful also to identify what the problems are. So my part of the, what Eduard asked me is to do that, so that's what I'm doing. But I do agree with you, and it is true the productivity in Spain is growing, but we were so much behind. We lost so many spaces that we're now kind of recovering what was before the financial crisis. So, So I also acknowledge the good things, and I'm very happy for it. We already mentioned that we need large amounts of investment, and that has been identified. And Europe lacks volume in resources, and this is something that also people that are in the investment sector is explaining. So I would like to highlight several aspects of the European financial markets that I think are relevant to identify what are the problems, okay? And we'll talk later about the positive parts. One is, and this is changing, but still there is a culture of avoiding risk. Europe savings of households mainly favor investing in savings, in banks and deposits or insurance products instead of equity or high-risk venture capital like in many other countries, especially in the US. The corporate financing is largely based on bank loans and less on bonds and equity, and that's also changing, but still there is part of the problem, which is the European fragmented market, as Eduard mentioned, and regulated by national rules. So the equity and corporate bond markets are shallow. They're still shallow in Europe, fragmented across jurisdictions with legal systems and tax regimes that are different. So, of course, this fragmentation is constraining the cross-border risk sharing that would be very favorable for Europe. Part of the European savings, and I think Carolina was mentioning this, is that they're willing to take risk, so some are starting to take risk, but some of that is going to US venture capital funds because they consider that they're more experienced and diversified. Of course, some of it stays in Europe, but there's still a challenge to keep those funds in the European area. And because of the European stock markets that are fragmented, many successful European companies that are at the stage of scaling up choose to IPO on NASDAQ and move to the US. And I was talking with a person yesterday that has succeeded in doing a double IPO, so here and in the US, and keeping the company in Europe. So success there is, but there is still challenges that we have to overcome. Finally, I was going to mention the Capital Markets Union that's now renamed as Savings and Investment Union. And you probably know more about how that is evolving, but it's still slow in its development. So maybe we can hope that some of those challenges that are facing will be moving forward. For example, pool European pension funds, redirecting European savings into venture capital. That also would be very important, and I think Italy is already doing something about it and imposing that a small percentage of those pension funds go into venture capital. That's a big step forward. Harmonize insolvency laws or establish a single parent system. I'll stop here because we're short of time.
Thanks. So, Carolina, we have in our society a very strong and active investment ecosystem, which is quite well represented today here. But we would like to get also your insights on how all of this could be improved, the behavior of the investment groups compared with your needs, and also compared with what you feel that your competitors in the US have. What do you think could be improvements in that area?
Yeah. So I used to say, and I have it in my LinkedIn profile, based on Peter Drucker, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Now I say the best way to secure the future is to build it, and I think this is what we are doing. At the end, at INBRAIN, we have to build semiconductors, so we are integrating vertically all that part of semiconductors fabrication, the microassembly with ASICs. We have to drive all the data architecture, all the intelligence, the electronics, mechanicals, everything. But that is building the industrialization tissue together with the talent to redefine those 50 next years. Now, that requires funds, a lot of funds, unfortunately. But I think, again, we are having the mindset. We are building it. I mean, everybody is doing their part. The public-private partnership, so the fact that we have ECDETI, that we have Fond ICO, that we have now SET, that we have the European Investment Bank, the European Commission, all strategically supporting this for a scale is what we need, is the mindset, and we have it. And I tell you something, it's on us. I compete with Elon Musk. In Neuralink, they have put $1 billion in 10 years. They are not going faster, right? Because it's hard. So we've been creative, and yes, we have less money. We still fundraised this 124 million in the last 5 years, but we also created a partnership with Merck, the oldest European pharma. We created a partnership with Mayo Clinic that invested on us and allowed us to test in the US best-class hospitals. We also brought Microsoft as a partner for intelligence. So yeah, the need is the mother of creativity. So you don't have $1 billion, you do other things, but you progress. Nothing is going to stop us. And I want to reiterate that everybody doing their part, we get that collective wisdom and that progress.
Thanks. And speaking about financing, Gábor, from EMBL, you have launched the EMBL Ventures initiative, which is a way to link the science that EMBL is doing and investment. Could you explain a little bit what was that, how it works, what's the experience?
So back in the year 2000, when I started setting up EMBL and innovation management at EMBL, we realized quite soon that what would be useful to have was to have our own venture capital vehicle, because there were venture capital companies around in the area, but eminent scientists who would go to them with an idea, they would be sent off and told, oh, that's very interesting, but why don't you come back once you have a business plan? And they didn't know what a business plan was or how to write one, etc. So we thought it would be good to have the in-house competence to be able to help scientists at a very early stage in holding their hand and in guiding them, because this sort of comes back to what I said before. We're good at many things in Europe, but we're very cautious still. And by the time we make a decision, the Americans have already been there, or it's too late. So the reason that we set up the venture capital fund was to be able to give advice, and the venture capital fund is completely independent. So it's not run by us, because that would be a conflict of interest. It was run by Tech Transfer. It's run by a separate company, but EMBL invested in both funds. So there were actually two funds. One was set up in 2001 and one was set up in 2010. And both, as a cornerstone investors, have the European Investment Fund, so the EIF. And the idea was to help scientists at an early stage in getting into the venture capital field. These funds were open to all member states of EMBL. So EMBL is set up a bit like CERN. So we have 27 European member states. And the pitches or the fund was open for any life science company in any of the member states to actually be financed. And this has been quite successful. But at the same time, what we also realized is very important is, number one, because of our own venture capital fund, we of course mobilized, and the factor was 20-fold of additional investment from the money that we invested, or the venture capital fund invested into the startup companies that we have created. And so far there have been 27 that have come out of EMBL. Because here again, we don't do things by numbers and statistics. We actually want to create companies that are viable and are going to be around in 5 and 10 years and actually do something which is really fundamental and game changing, and not just to create startups so we can tell the politicians that in 5 years' time they have created 300 jobs, and year 6 they're all going to fold. But the other thing which is extremely important, where I think that Europe could be better, not only in mobilizing private capital, but also in mobilizing investment at a very early stage. Because it's great to have mega funds, but the mega funds can only invest in companies that have actually come through a certain stage. So we need to actually have a higher number of early seed financing capabilities to actually also fund projects from a very early stage, and they don't need to be in a company setting, but actually to do proof of concept, which we've actually created a fund for within the institute. And this is from money that we have generated over the last 25 years, so surpluses and that we have created from technology transfer and innovation management. And this is essential because I always say that the proof of concept projects that we actually fund, they're a bit like having one loose chip on the roulette table. You're just going to put it on a number and hope that it's you have a chance of 1 to 36. But if you never play that, you won't have any chance at all. And it is important to actually have this very early seed funding, high-risk investment. You don't need a lot of money for that, but you need to have the ability to do so because those are going to be your champions in the future. And there are some examples in Europe where we're actually doing that quite well, and I will end with that. And this example would be, for instance, the ERC grants. So the ERC grants, if you are a PI and you get an ERC grant, then at the end of the granting phase, you actually get 20% of that money on top if you can for actually translational and commercialization activities coming out of the project. And that is a very good idea. That is money that is well spent. And I think we actually need more money at the beginning of the whole process because I think there's enough money to go around. When we see that things are going to be successful, we need to have more money when we don't actually quite clearly see whether it's going to be a success or not.
Thank you, Gábor. I think that we are running very out of time, but it could be also important to hear you, President Calviño, the thoughts on how all the initiatives, both at European, Spanish, Catalan level, to increase this finance of deep tech, sometimes have problems to land, and how do you think that it could be aligned, the industrial policy, scientific policy, and economic policy, something that is quite fragmented at European, national levels?
From the European Investment Bank, and I was not surprised to hear the European Investment Fund, our subsidiary, was also participating in this because, as I said a moment ago, the institution I head represents 30% of venture debt, 25% of venture capital in Europe. So it shouldn't come as no surprise that it's playing such an important catalyst role. And in the last years, we have seen this increasing significantly. So this, when I said a moment ago, we have been able to double the number of mega funds, we created 13, doubling the number, and that's in 2 years. So things are moving, and they're moving in the right direction, they're moving very fast. What we consider to be our key objective now is scale and speed. And I think this is a summary of what has been said here. So let's all focus on scale and speed. But since I am with the scientific community, let me also leave you with a challenge, an intellectual challenge, which is, what is risk? Because we say the whole world is changing, everything is turning upside down, but we seem to continue to do the same assessment of what is risky. And we were just discussing this implicitly, no? And I was reflecting as you were speaking. And these last weeks I've been reflecting a lot on this. So, is a scale-up that has a new management team and less than 2 years in life in a defense industry that has just got a contract from a government, is this risky? What is the company that has lost more value in the last couple of weeks? IBM. As blue chip and low risk as it gets. Should we not rethink what we consider to be high risk? From what level, at what point in time we change the way we approach this as investors? This is not going to be, I'm not saying things are easy. Yeah? I'm having these conversations with insurance companies every week. And of course, insurance companies come from the other extreme, pension funds. So it's not, I'm not saying this is easy. I just think this is something that needs to be reflected and that science and analysis can also help. Likewise, this week I had in the forum in Luxembourg, Executive Vice President of the Commission, Teresa Rivera. She said, you know, what we are discovering about oil and gas is that they are intermittent. You remember, you know, the whole debate about renewables is, oh, they have a problem because they are intermittent. Now, let me ask you, in this last period, Would you say renewables are the problem? No, it's oil and gas that are becoming intermittent energies. So we also have to rethink, the way we assess the different technologies. Likewise, and I finish with this, as European Investment Bank, we chair the group of multilateral development institutions. We will be chairing it next year. But this year, we are chairing an initiative called Global Emerging Markets Database, bringing together the wealth of information of 40 years of experience of multilateral institutions and other international financial lenders to around the world, to emerging markets. And what the GEMS gives us is this very interesting insight, which is that private borrowers from emerging markets behave quite close to private borrowers from developed markets. That the likelihood of default and the likelihood of losses in Africa is much lower than maybe we would have presupposed. So we're working very closely with the rating agencies to introduce this evidence into the way the ratings are made for the countries. And that can make a difference in terms of the risk assessment, and therefore it can really trigger investment in these countries. My point to you is we should embrace change as also something that forces us to rethink the way we have been assessing what we are doing, and in particular the way we assess risk. And also, when we're talking about risk, we need to reach scale and speed, and think that the speed of development of entrepreneurs and businesses is not comparable to what happened in the 20th century. And we also have to adjust this approach to the benefit of investments in the right places. I hope that next time we meet, we will be able to celebrate, that things have moved and we can see the difference. I do see the difference. Maybe it will take a bit more time to reach the scale and the speed for it to be perceived, for the whole economy. But partnerships and working together is surely the right way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that is a good way to finish the panel. So please join me thanking these panelists.